This is the Real Change Wilmington Podcast, Episode 14, Republican Primary, Mayoral Candidates Blind Debate, 2023, with our guests today, John Stanforth and Pat Haley.
There's a lot of people that remember when Wilmington was one of the finest cities in the area. As a matter of fact, they were recognized for that a few years ago when Nick Evelyn, I believe, was mayor. One of the finest small towns in America. We've strayed from that. And part of that societal. It isn't just one person that's caused it. But we can fix it. And that's why I'm running for mayor.
What's going on, everybody? This is your host of the Real Change Wilmington Podcast, Dustin Pierce.
And I'm Emily Spencer, the co-host.
And we are here with a special episode for you guys today, the mayoral candidate debates. So how we're going to do these, we couldn't get both candidates in the same room. So we're doing a blind debate where we'll have each candidate read the same or answer the same questions. And then through the magic of editing, we'll put it together side by side. So we have Pat Haley as our first guest today. And we'll let Pat decide if he wants to start or be the second person to speak.
I'll start.
You'll start? Okay, so we're going to ask each candidate the same questions. So Emily has a timer here. The first topic or issue that we're going to go over is business and economic development. So Pat, you have 5 minutes to describe how you see the state of business and economic development in Wilmington, and then how you would affect this if elected mayor.
Well, I would go back originally to the time I was elected county commissioner. And it was just actually a couple years, maybe a year after DHL had left Wilmington. And at that particular time, the area, especially Wilmington, was in chaos, total chaos. Unemployment was 23 to 24%. We had just a lot of uncertainty. People were concerned, and there was a lot of publicity surrounding Wilmington at the time because it was such a major blow. Out of a town of about 12,000 in the region, 8,000 people lost their job. So it impacted a lot of families. And I did take office under those circumstances. But as a county commissioner, along with the other two, we were able to lower. When I left, the unemployment rate was around 4%. And we were only the second county in Ohio that was totally debt-free. We had no debt, which is very, very unusual. And so with those thoughts in mind, we were able to reach out to companies, and we tried to keep taxes low to make it appealing. As far as regulations, the same thing. Two of the things that companies look at when they come to an area or think about coming to an area, is there a lot of red tape? Are we put through a lot of hoops? Taxes. So often a company will come in, the first thing a city or county or township will do is raise taxes in some way. And we did not do that in any stretch of the imagination. So as a consequence, now, all these years later, we're, I think, enjoying the benefits of that because we have a lot of jobs. We're back. Actually, there are more jobs available now in Clinton County than we had at the time DHL left. The biggest problem that I see, Amazon had come back and wanted to try Wilmington on a test basis to see if the air park would be a good fit for them. Well, they did 5 workforce studies. And one of the problems was, being a small county community, the workforce wasn't there. And so they decided that they would go to Cincinnati, which is basically their main area service facility now. But we've been able to address that. In some ways, we still have a lot of jobs and we need to increase our workforce. But as you know, our neighboring county, Fayette County, has grown. We're going to be able to provide workers for that area. But I think the main thing that we can do we reach out, we follow on every lead as far as business and make it as friendly as we possibly can to any potential businesses.
Okay. Under time. Sounds good. All right, we'll ask the same question to current Mayor John Stanforth then. All right, Mayor Stanforth, so we just asked Pat to describe how he saw the state of business and economic development in Wilmington and how he would address that or affect that if he was elected. So I'm going to ask you the same thing. How do you see the state of business and economic development in Wilmington, and how would you affect this if reelected? And we'll give you 5 minutes on the timer.
Well, the state of business is very good in Wilmington right now. We're really blessed to have a prosperous community. The biggest issue for the employers in Wilmington is finding enough employees to do the job, whether it's at the restaurant or whether it's at the factory or out at the airport. As far as economic development, we do finally have a new economic development person hired. And my understanding is they're starting, I think they start this week or next week. I've forgotten now. They told me when that was going to be. Because one thing we do need is a key person that when businesses are thinking about relocating here, that they can speak to. And that's what that economic development person's job is going to be. Let's see. There's just a lot of exciting things happening here. We've got 3 separate developers that are developing properties to build homes. We've got projects going on out around the airpark. We've got a large tract of land, about 150 some acres, that we have a company that comes in that wants to develop warehousing. And also our Ford dealership is talking about building out on Rombeck Avenue. They did not buy the building from Bill Marine when they bought the business, and they want to relocate. And Ford Motor Company wants them to build out at the interstate. We want them to stay in Wilmington, and we think that's a good location for them on that side of town. That way they can help service Hillsborough, Washington Courthouse. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else. So much happens, I have trouble keeping track of all of it, actually. Larry Roberts has bought the Hawley building. That's right across from the Murphy Theater. And if you've been by there, you've seen his truck with the trash chute leading into it. They're gutting that property. I'm not sure exactly what Larry's plans are on that, but I do know typically when he buys a property, he goes in, he fixes it up, cleans it up, and he gets a tenant in it. Now, the other big thing downtown that this new economic development person will be able to get rolling for us is the purchase of the Masonic Temple. We have set up a program called Drive, and there are 4 entities that have put money into that Drive program. That's the city, the county, the CIC, and the Visitors Convention Bureau. The last one may seem a little odd, but actually part of their task is to get people to come to Wilmington, the Convention and Business Bureau. So, when we call it feet on the street, they also do heads and beds. So they do those 2 things. They get people to come to our hotel, that's the head and bed. They get people to come to our restaurant, come to our theater. That's what we call feet on the street. But we have funded a project called Drive. And one of the things we want to do with that money is to buy the Masonic Temple and then rehab it into a Class 1 office space. And we're very excited about getting that happen. Right now, the economic development people are in negotiations with the Masonic Temple, but it looks like we're going to be able to pull that off here, hopefully very shortly. And then we'll be looking at a developer that will then come in and develop that property into office space. I can't think of anything else right offhand.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you. So we had Pat answer the last question first. So we're going to have you answer this question first. And it's about transportation. So describe how you see the state of transportation in Wilmington and how you would affect this if we elected mayor.
Again, the director of our transportation part is a lady called Jessica Powell. And she's just a go-getter, real dynamic personality. And she has some really great ideas there. But to give you a little background on the transportation department, we have 25 vehicles in our fleet. That's a lot of cabs, a lot of taxis. They are the largest department in the city. They have approximately 50 employees. And they give, or at least in 2022, the last year we have statistics for, they gave 100,000 rides in this community. It's just a number you think that's mind-boggling. And it is, but that's how important the transit department is to our community. And it probably touches more of our citizens than any other, hands down, touches more of our citizens than any other department. It has about a $2 million budget, and the majority of that is grant dollars. Jessica right now is developing a study on efficiency and the possibility of providing additional services, including the possibility of expanding our hours and our service area. For instance, if someone needs to go to Blanchester, we would go to Blanchester this day at this time. It would be more of a scheduled thing rather than an as-needed basis, which is how we do it now. Same way if you're in Sabina. However many days a week it justified, at whatever time, we go to Sabina. And then the most common places people want to go to are Walmart, Kroger's, and the doctor's office. And we could, our hope is to get that study done where we can implement this. We are implementing a new dispatch system as we speak. We're breaking that in. A lot of our drivers are older, retired people, and they're not real tech savvy. I'm included in that. Thing I say more often in a day is, come here a minute, I need help. Because I'm running the computer and I can't figure out how to click on the right thing to make it happen. So anyway, that means every driver will not be doing pencil and paper anymore. It'll all be done on an iPad. And we are hiring new drivers. The majority of them work part-time, and we're paying $15.37. So if you got anybody out there that's looking for a job, part-time job, my goodness, it's a great thing for part-time employment. Let's see, what did I leave out? I talked about the new vehicles, or the number of vehicles, talked about the people, talked about our budget. Oh, and well, let me talk about it on a personal level of how important our transit system is. My sister for health reasons, didn't have a driver's license. She had to give up her car. So she literally depended on our transit department to go every place she wanted to go. And she was a very social person. I think she went to some type of social engagement every single day. But she also had doctor's appointments to go to. She had to go to Walmart, do her shopping, again, go to Kroger's. And the transit department made Janie's life in our community, and she passed away a couple years ago. But anyway, it made her life very enjoyable in this community, and that's true of any older retired person, especially if for whatever reason they've lost their driving privileges.
Time. Good. That was good. Thank you.
1 second to spare.
Awesome. So the same question to you, Pat, is going to be about transportation. How do you describe the state of transportation in Wilmington, and how would you affect this if elected mayor?
We've been blessed in Wilmington to have an outstanding transit system, because I remember when Nick Evelyn was mayor, it was during his tenure that negotiations were made with the state of Ohio and arrangements were made, and the first vehicles that came in were just outstanding, and we were able to put together a very effective transit system. The one thing about Wilmington, and I have lived in a couple different places, is the drivers. The drivers will get out. If you go to Kroger's, they'll help you load the van. And when you get home, they'll deliver your groceries upstairs if need be. And that's very unusual. But, I think it's significant of, and certainly representative of Midwest values. It's just kind of the right thing to do. They don't have to do it. It's not in their job description. But I don't think there's many places that do that. They don't ask for tips. It's just the right thing to do. An elderly person comes out with bags of groceries. They get out of the vehicle. They help them load. And we've really been blessed, I think, with a very, very effective transit system in Wilmington. There have been talk of trying to expand that. And it's always a question of funding. I know when I was a county commissioner, Taylor Stuckert had come over and talked about expanding some of the transportation services into the county. I don't think that has actually happened yet, but I know that that's on the drawing board. And if there's any way that funding could be obtained, I'm sure the county commissioners would be in favor of doing it. And as a city, as long as it didn't take away the services of the city, which I don't think it would, that's good. So it's just one extra service that I think that the transportation of whatever the name of it, Wilmington Transit Authority, I think it's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is going to be about housing. And this is not to talk about homelessness yet, just housing. So how do you describe the state of housing in Wilmington, and how would you affect this if elected mayor?
Housing is something that is, the subject of housing has come up within the last few years because Wilmington's been growing. And there is a need for housing. I know currently the drive-in theater area is being developed, and housing is proposed of, I think, 2 phases. They want to put in some houses on one side of that land, and then as that is finished, then they want to use the other side. And the developers were at the council meeting last Thursday, I believe, and they were talking about their plans. There was some question on the part of some have asked me about it. I said, all I know is what I've heard and what I read, that there were some questions about the size of the homes. They wanted to make sure that they were appropriate, that they weren't going to be too small. And I do know that the council had asked them to come back and meet with them again to try to iron out some of these details. And I'm confident that they probably will do that. The developer said that they had originally thought that those homes would sell for about $250,000. So if that's the case, those should be pretty nice homes. The Denver Addition subdivision, Catherine Drive in that area, those homes sell for the mid 250,000s, and that's a very, very established subdivision. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Now, there was a situation in 2019, a local businessman, Bill Marine, was putting a subdivision in on Prairie Avenue. And the ground hadn't been broken, but a lot of the lots had been sold, and they were proceeding with building some high-end homes. They'd even named the streets out there. And I guess at the last minute, for whatever reason, the city had gone to Miss Marine and said that you would have to put in a roundabout on Prairie Road, which was going to be $1.9 million. And it was a deal killer. So we lost an opportunity of having some very, very nice high-end homes. And again, I go back to regulations, red tape, and my position if I'm elected mayor. We're going to work with people. We're going to communicate with people. We're going to get those kinds of problems ironed out so that we can have those homes that Wilmington needs badly.
Nice. Thank you. All right, so I'll ask the same question to current Mayor John Stanforth. So the next question is about housing. So how would you describe the state of housing in Wilmington, and what would you do to affect that if reelected mayor?
Well, I think I talked about that a moment ago, that we do have 3 separate developments going on. The one in the Timber Glen area, they already have streets and curbs put in. I expect to see some houses built there yet this year. Maturkas is not quite as far along in the same area. I would expect houses to be going in there maybe late fall or early spring of next year. The third one that is still in planning stages right now is out at the old drive-in theater location. And once we get all the planning approved, then they'll be putting in streets and curbs this summer. And again, the following year, I expect them, to start building houses in that subdivision too. The other nice thing about that subdivision, it completes some connectivity issues that we have. Well, whenever we put in new subdivisions now, we require either sidewalks on both sides of the street, or we require some type of trail to add to our trail system. And Kentucky Avenue will not be open to through traffic, vehicle traffic. However, it will be open to pedestrian traffic, and it will be open, of course, to bicycles as an extension of our trail system. We're also going to be addressing some issues there about the north side of Wilmington used to flood at every heavy rain, and the county got involved, and we did some drainage projects that really alleviated most of those flooding problems. But there are still some minor flooding in that area. And by doing this project, we know we're going to address those issues too. That's the task the engineers have. And that's one of the minor holdups right now on their plans. Planning Commission has already approved it. City Council has already done first reading, approve it, and I expect Council to approve that to approve that also. then we've also got multiple, what I call infill lots, not a new development. Streets are already there, utilities are already there. The new houses are being built. And, I forgot how many we built last year. I think there were 14 new homes built inside the city limits. And there are more available. And you can get those lots at a real bargain price. If you go to the land bank, you talk to Taylor Stuckert. I'm not completely sure exactly how the land bank works, but I know it's after 3 years that they sell those lots, and I'm not sure why the lag time there is, but they have certain rules they have to follow. So over and above the new developments coming in, we're having multiple new houses built too. Let's see, and we do need developers for multifamily housing. That's what we're lacking right now. The company that wants to build apartments or condominiums, we were encouraging the developers to drive in to do some multifamilies, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work in the way they have chosen to develop that. But I'm hoping that some other developer will come along and see an opportunity here for multifamily. Real need for that. I think that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. So the next topic is going to be on addiction and mental health. So how do you see the state of addiction and mental health issues in Wilmington, and how would you affect these if reelected as mayor?
Well, there's no question that it is an issue for us. And it's mostly seen in the public because of the homeless people that we have, although you can't always tell they're actually homeless by looking at them. But there's no municipal government that has the tools to handle this problem alone. We just don't have the money to do it. And the issue goes back, 60 years ago. The state of Ohio typically institutionalized drug addicts and those suffering from mental illness. But beginning in the late 70s, the state and the federal governments adopted a community health model as hospitals and residential treatment programs were shuttered and closed down. And it was then that we began to see most modern, widespread challenge of homelessness and poor mental health treatment. People didn't know where to go. Wilmington would bankrupt itself if it were left to solve this problem alone. But with the hard-won reforms we've made to the police department in the last years, we're already seeing a more robust law enforcement response to vagrancy. But we cannot arrest or jail our way out of this problem. Those people have rights, and we cannot violate. I can't arrest somebody just because they're poor or they ride a bicycle carrying a backpack. They're not breaking any laws. State and federal funding for housing and treatment programs are desperately needed. But closer to home, we need greater voices on the Homeless Coalition to help organize our community response and to help us lobby the state and federal government for resources proportionate to the enormity of this tax. In fact, we're setting up a group to go up and speak to our state senator and our state representative to express what our concerns down here and what our needs are and what our issues are and how can you help us. To me, it's also falls to the churches the social organizations, and our churches already do so darn much that they don't get credit for. A couple things. They literally come down to our Father's kitchen and they serve the food. They help pay for the food that's given out. And you say, well, that encourages them. Well, not really. All we're doing is feeding the poor and feeding the downtrodden, and I think that's what Christ would want us to do. In fact, I know that's what Christ would want us to do. He did it himself. And the churches also fund our relocation program. I hear all the time, well, they're dropped off here in the middle of the night, but they're really from here. Well, the first question we ask is, where are you from? And once we find out where they're from, we get them transportation back to them. For instance, somebody shows up here, they're from Middletown. We transport them back to Middletown because we've learned with this issue that you need structure and support in your life if you're ever going to get better. And even though the families kicked you out and they said they don't want anything to do with you, they're still family. And if you beg hard enough, they're going to give you another chance because they're family. And the churches fund the cost of the transportation. That's no taxpayers' dollars goes for that. And that's a lot of our solution. It's keep our churches involved as much as they are. I think that's enough.
It's time. Good. Thank you. So, Pat, same question to you. How do you describe the state of addiction and mental health issues in Wilmington, and how would you affect this if elected mayor?
Well, so often addiction and mental health go hand in hand. There seems to be, unfortunately, that combination that tend to maybe breed each other a little bit. But I remember when President Kennedy in 1963, he signed the Community Mental Health Act. And what basically that did, there had been inpatient institutions provided by the state. A lot of federal money was involved. He signed that legislation that basically closed those institutions. And part of the reason, a big reason, they say that they wanted people getting outpatient treatment, but truly what part of the problem was, the state didn't want to fund it. They were costly. So people that needed to be in institutions, they were referred then to many of the community mental health services. The federal government did provide funding to build them, the structures, but what they didn't do, they did not provide funds for operations. And so we had buildings, and some of the larger cities were able to fund it, but many of the smaller agencies and towns didn't have the money to hire the personnel and the doctors, the psychiatrists that needed to see people. Although Wilmington, Clinton County, and I was on the board of the Mental Health Association for several years when I was sheriff, and we were able to see people. And now there's several agencies, mental health agencies in Wilmington. But it's an ongoing problem because what happened, some of the individuals, and there are people who need constant medications, they need to have, psychoanalysis, whatever needs that they have, they weren't able to receive it because the outpatient process, so often they did not keep their appointments. They wouldn't take their medication. And as a consequence, the behaviors started to wander outside the norms of society. And we had people who were living in the streets. And this isn't unique to Wilmington. You could apply this to just about any town around, and or at least, in the United States for that matter. And we have people sleeping in the woods. We have a homeless issue. And as I've said a couple times recently at the council meeting, there's two distinct groups of homeless, if you will. There are those that's had problems, marital problems, divorces, loss of job, their house burned down, something that truly has taken them away from normal housing. And then we have a group of people who are vagrants. And that's been defined by Webster's, people who just wander around, kind of petty thieves, do quality of life issues that are detrimental to the community. And we have that in Wilmington. And I have talked to a lot of people in the last few months. I don't bring the subject up, but since I'm running for mayor, people ask me, what will you do about this problem? And I can say, from the standpoint of a guy that's lived most of my life here, this is one of the biggest issues I have ever heard in the city of Wilmington right now. And if elected, I'm going to take care of it. It's not an easy problem. And I'm not saying I'm taking care of mental health. I'm talking about the crime element. I'm going to work with the police department. We're going to get people put into the criminal justice system, which then will allow the courts to mandate treatment, because now they're just kind of wandering around, not getting treatment. Sunday, my wife and I are coming down Mulberry Street. We see a fella coming out of the construction area by the trail, no shirt on. We go by, he pulls his pants down, then his underwear, and he exposes himself to me and my wife in downtown Wilmington in the middle of the day. And these things have been going on. And I hear this over and over and over. So if I'm elected, we're going to address the crime element.
All right, thank you. So our next topic is going to be about homelessness and crime. So Pat, you're going to be first here and describe how you see how you would describe the issue of homelessness and crime in Wilmington and what you would do to affect this if elected mayor.
It is a major problem right now, and I've had a lot of feedback from a lot of people. If it hasn't touched them, it's touched someone in their family or a neighbor or a friend. And when I say touch them, I am talking about quality of life issues. No one that I know would not help somebody in need. I think that my father's kitchen has fed a lot of people. I've heard people say, oh, if you're mayor, you're going to close down my father's kitchen. No, if I'm the mayor, what I'm going to do is address the crime, quality of life issues. Because you're homeless, you don't get a spatial permit that allows you to break the law. If I went out and did some of those things, I'd be arrested. But for some reason, and maybe it's philosophical, as I said before, John's a nice fellow. I think we just have different beliefs. I want to help the poor too. I just think we're not going to be successful as a town until we get the town safe. I've talked to several people uptown, business people, who said that they are afraid at night when they get off work to walk to their car. That's a very fundamental right that a person should be able to feel safe and not worry about harm to themselves. And the population we're talking about aren't felons. Most of them aren't. I think there's some mixed in. But for most cases, petty thefts, those type of things that are going on. But the people are unpredictable. They confront others. The behaviors, in my perspective, are not normal. And I know that's a big concern for people. So we can have all the nice trails in the world. We could have as many businesses that we could bring into town. But if people don't feel safe, they're not going to use them. And so we have to make the town safe and clean. And I do know that there's been squatters. There's been some controversy about Mr. Fred Hott, who's a landlord and a realtor. I've known Fred for 40 years. and he's owned properties. He's been criticized in the past for not keeping them up to date and that kind of thing, some repairs. But now, the same thing is going on across town, because last week, a person came to me and said, we've got a homeless encampment on my private property, out by the high school, out by the middle school. And there were pictures taken. I saw them. I went out by there. And so my question is, we're making, or I guess Mr. Hott's been charged with 25 criminal charges, but yet the same thing's going on in the encampment: trespassing, litter, needles, etc. As far as I know, none of them were charged. They're having to dismantle, at the cost to the city, that encampment. So I don't know why we have two groups of people. In fairness, if we're going to do it to a businessman that's 88 years old, shouldn't we also arrest people doing the same thing at the other end of town? At least that's my perspective. And I don't know that any arrests were made with the vagrants. But to come into a property, and let's say that you and I lived in Wilmington, and people just decided they're going to put tents up in my backyard, don't I have a right to live free from that? It's trespassing. The revised code is very, very specific. You cannot trespass, criminal trespass. I forget what, it's a 29.11 code, I believe. You cannot trespass on the property of another. It's against the law. And so I think if the city's going to go after that elderly gentleman, then they should also go after those breaking the law. And that's my point. It isn't a question so much of feeding. I think people are being fed, and they do have places to stay. I'm talking about crime.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to hear from you, John, about the topic of homelessness and crime. So describe for us how you see the issue of homelessness and crime in Wilmington and how you plan to affect this if reelected mayor.
Well, I think I just talked a lot about homelessness in the last segment, but I can sure talk about crime. Statistically, our crime rates are down. And I know you come up with all kinds of numbers about this, but the recognized agency for tracking crime is the FBI. And we go by what their statistics say, and they say our crime rate is down. Not a lot, but at least it's starting down, and we hope to keep it that way. And right now, we have a police force that's fully staffed. Our chief is Ron Fitham, and he just took that job over a little less than a year ago. He was with the department before as a sergeant, and Ron is just doing an outstanding job. He's, I'm sure if you look back at the history, you can see that I've struggled with police chief, getting one that I felt was doing the job correctly. And Ron, he's really turned out to be the guy. He's got very capable people under him. Neil Rager is his top sergeant, who's what we call the second in command. I would make him assistant police chief, except the way our government is set up statutorily, if I promoted him to assistant police chief, he would no longer be eligible for overtime, and he would actually have to take a pay cut. So we've kept him as the top sergeant and made him second in command. And then we are fully staffed right now. And that's one of the few times since I've been mayor that we've been able to reach fully staffing. Police is not something that a lot of people want to go into anymore. And we struggle to find candidates and good officers. And then invariably, I've especially had this problem with my female officers. we get them hired, we get them trained, and then Kettering comes along and hires them away and gives them $20,000 more a year. I certainly can't fault them for leaving with, that kind of pay raise. But as I said, right now we are fully staffed. We run our bicycle patrol now. We have officers trained to do that. We do not run it in this kind of weather. That's more of a summertime thing. We start that in May, and we usually pull them back in off the sidewalk or the bicycle patrol in October. Right now, our K9, we do not have one at this time, but we are actively getting another one. You don't go to the pound and find the K9 unit. It is a long, involved process to get one. Our last K9, we had to retire him early. We were not expecting to lose that dog as quickly as we did. Normal, the dogs last 5 to 6 years. It's a tough thing that they do. And both the K9 and the bike patrol, we don't do them on a regular schedule. Because we don't want the bad guys to know, every Thursday they run bicycle patrol between 7 and 9 or whatever hours. Same way, when's the K9 on duty? So we don't announce that. We do it somewhat randomly. So when we do catch the bad guys, they're as surprised as everybody else is. And suddenly, wow, where'd that come from? And that bike patrol, man, they can slip up on you in a heartbeat. Let's see. We're in good shape on dispatch too. We were struggling to find dispatchers for a while, and I think that's reflected on Ron Fithen, on what a good show he's running. That people want to work for him, and they stay.
Very good, thank you. So next question is going to be response to community concerns and criticism. And John, you're going to go first. So how would you respond to some community concerns and criticisms about you as a mayor?
Well, Harry Truman probably said it best. If you want a friend, get a dog. Now, my situation is, last winter, my dog died. So I think I'm friendless right now. and most of that is because every time you make a decision, there are two sides to every issue. And I'm not saying there's a right side and a wrong side. There's just simply two sides. And you're going to make somebody mad at you if they didn't get what they felt was their way. But we gather the information and we make our decisions. And if you're upset with me, I'm sorry, but I made the best decision I could. And if you're happy with the decision I've made, then vote for me. I'm trying to think of an example that I could use. Oh, well, these subdivisions that we're doing. There's always adjoining neighbors, and adjoining neighbors they're worried about additional traffic. They're worried about dust. They're worried about the disruption. They're worried about, will the sewer system handle it? Is there enough water supply? And we actually address all of those issues in the planning commission. If you're going to come in and put a new subdivision in, that's one of the first things we do is we check with our utility supervisor. Are the sewer lines big enough? And if they're not, then it's the developer's responsibility to upgrade them. Is there enough water? Is there enough cable? All the infrastructures involved. But, the other thing, I do not do Facebook. I do have a Facebook site for the mayor, but that's an information site for me to put information out to the citizens on what's going on and why. And Margie in my office actually runs that site. I haven't done personal Facebook. It'll be 4 years in May. First of all, I found it out to be a huge waste of time, which is absolutely their objective. They want you to get on that computer and stay there. And they're very good at it. And when I realized how much time I was wasting on it, I was like, I'm quitting this. And now it's so changed, I think, from the beginning, because now it seems to me like it's just a gripe site where nobody's accountable. You can say anything you want to. You can say whatever you want about anybody. Nobody fact checks it. Nobody says, is that really true or not? So I just, if you're trying to reach me through Facebook, you're not going to get there. I'm sorry, or any of the other sites. I've never tweeted in my life unless I'm trying to call in a bird. I'm a bird watcher. Let's see, what's some of the others? I can't even think what all the hard names are because I don't do them. I just don't do the social media sites. I think that's enough.
Yeah, thank you. That was good. That was really good. All right, Pat. So same question to you. It's just an opportunity to respond to any community concerns or criticisms that you've heard about you in your campaign.
Well, I think anytime you hold public office, which I have, you get criticism. Not everyone agrees with you, and I'm sure John probably feels the same way. But as I've mentioned, I'm not running so much against John. He's a nice fellow. I'm running against the issue, or I'm running to address the issues that's occurring in Wilmington right now. And so I'm not one that's using any personal attacks against John. I don't plan to do that in my campaign, but I disagree with him on some issues. And I think people, when you go around, they expect you to say, well, why should I vote for you? What's the difference? What are you going to do if you're elected? And I tell them. And as time is going on, I see that John and I have different points of view. He seems to be a little more tolerant of the crime issue than I'm going to be. I have a background in law enforcement, and I was a law and order sheriff. I was strict. We were able to have safe streets, county roads, etc. And that's not a criticism of John. We had different backgrounds. He was a contractor. I couldn't build a house, but he could. And I have a background in law enforcement, and I'm not sure that I know he doesn't have that experience. And that's not a criticism. That's just the reality. And so my perspective is going to be different in that area. And I do have a plan. I can't get into the security aspects of what I would do, but I think people know me well enough with my record to know that I have done that before, and that we were able to bring law and order to the county at a time when drugs were rampant. And we've had a good record as sheriff. I've had a good staff when I was with the sheriff's department. So as we grow older, we gain wisdom, we gain experience. And as I sit here, I'm in a unique situation because the vagrancy issue is a large issue, and it's going to take somebody to be able to address it. And there's not many people in the position I'm in. And basically, it's one of the reasons I decided to run. As I mentioned in another podcast to you, I've been happily retired. Really didn't need it. Career is behind me, but I just love this town, and I hate to see the direction it's going. So that's why I did it. And again, John has his point of view. I have mine, and in May, the people will decide.
Thank you. So last question is just a few minutes for you to tell people why you are running for mayor. As a closing statements here.
I think I already did,
Sure.
But it may sound corny to some, but not to me. We all have hometowns. And regardless of where you're from, there are spatial memories that you have there. And being a native of Wilmington, and I've talked to a lot of people who grew up here, they don't recognize the town anymore because we've not had some of the issues that we're presently having. And again, part of that is not just a vagrancy. This isn't a one-issue campaign. We need to expand the downtown. We need to bring reasons for people to come downtown. We need to have nice restaurants. We need to bring in business. And I had mentioned before, if there was a person who wanted to start a bakery, for example, instead of having them do it on the outskirts of the downtown, let's bring them downtown. So we have to give them some type of incentive to do that. Or maybe a shoe store. I've talked to some people in Xenia about bringing a shoe store to Wilmington. I'm not the mayor, but I talk to a lot of people. And that's, if I am elected, those are the kinds of things I'm going to do. Because I do remember the time, we're not going back to 1950. That's impossible. Those days are gone. But we can bring quality businesses. We compete with Walmart. We compete with some of the box stores. But, people do want to support local business if given the opportunity. So we need to bring them here. And that's why I think when we talk about our hometowns, there's a lot of people that remember when Wilmington was one of the finest cities in the area. As a matter of fact, they were recognized for that a few years ago when Nick Evelyn, I believe, was mayor. One of the finest small towns in America. We've strayed from that. And part of that's societal. It isn't just one person that's caused it. But we can fix it. And that's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you very much. So I'll ask the same question to John, and then we'll close out. All right, John. So last question is, why are you running for mayor?
Well, it's about my grandkids and my great-grandkids, and about the town that our generation is going to be leaving them. And I want them to have a bright future. Because, how do we help make our community more competitive, more livable, and more relevant? And that's what I'm trying to do. Make it a place where not only my kids, but other kids want to live and other people want to live. And I always think about this. Why is the biggest export from Wilmington our children and our grandchildren? Why don't they see the value of staying here? And I've kind of got a mixed record on that. I have one granddaughter that lives in northern Kentucky. Used to work in downtown Cincinnati. Now she works from home. Her husband, though, does work he's a UPS driver, and he does work in northern Kentucky. So even though she works from home, she's not coming back to Wilmington. I have a granddaughter that her and her husband and his dad own a tire store here in town. So they're pretty well set. I'll do a shameless plug, Grove Tires. And then I have a grandson who has a welding shop out on South Street, Jerry Runk, fabrication shop, doing pretty well for himself. If you listen to Mike Rowe, be a welder, and he's a welder, and he's really in demand. But anyway, I've lost some kids, and I've kept some kids here. But I got more great-grandchildren coming up. And I want them to be able to not only be able to stay in this community, but I want them to want to stay here. And a lot of that is making the city what we call livable. Where we have bike trails, where we have nice restaurants, where we have a nice park system, where we have things for people to do. And the other quality of life issue is keeping our taxes and our fees reasonable and affordable. And we have done that. There have been 2 tax increases since I've been mayor, but both of them were voted on by the citizens, and the citizens approved them, not me. They increased our income tax, but we're still, even at that level, we're 20% less than Washington Courthouse. We're probably 35 or 40% less than Xenia on our income tax. And then the other tax that the citizens approved was the one to fund our cemetery. And we're starting to make some serious improvements out there. But when you take something over at that age, you always have unexpected expenses. Right now we have a bridge that we've had to close. We had one a year ago that we had to close and got it rehabbed. Now we got another one. This one is a little more complicated. The bids we got in were over $100,000, and we've just got to come up with a different way of doing it. That's a lot of money to spend on a cemetery bridge. And I will say this, that what I have promised the people, I've kept those promises. That's it.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. Well, there you have it, folks. That concludes the blind debates for the Republican primary mayoral candidates. That is such a mouthful. But if you have any other questions for the candidates, please feel free to reach out to them directly. I'm sure you can find their information online, and we will do our best to link to it in our show notes. Anything else, Emily?
I mean, you can follow us for the latest Real Change updates on our social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Real Change Wilmington.
I hope you liked this episode. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us. And until next time, I'm Dustin Pierce.
And I'm Emily Spencer.
Keep it real, Wilmington.